Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Drinks and Discover with Upstream. I'm Prema Gurinathan, and I'm Managing Director of Upstream. We're a partnership between Imperial College London and Hammersmith and Fulham, which is a borough in West London. Our mission is to turn the borough into a leading destination for the science, tech, and creative industries and help transform White City, where Imperial College has a growing footprint, into an innovation district. There are three parts to this evening: a fireside chat with Russ Shaw from Tech London Advocates, which will take us probably about 25 minutes. Then we've got a cocktail making session with Kindred's bartender, 2 gin cocktails, and once you've got yourself a suitable beverage, we move to about 2 rounds of networking via Zoom rooms. We are using this evening to raise funds for United in Hammersmith and Fulham, which helps fund activities that promote a strong sense of togetherness in this diverse London borough. 100% of the funds they raise for their COVID-19 fund will go to charities that are doing really great work. So please support them. And somebody from my team will put the link in to the chat function right now. And thank you very much. And we've got 2 ground rules. Number 1, please mute yourselves, but please put your questions to Russ in the chat function, and I'll do my best to interweave them into our fireside chat. We've got a lot to get through, so let's make a start. Russ, I think you might want to unmute yourself. I'm delighted to introduce Russ Shaw, the founder of Tech London Advocates and Global Tech Advocates. He founded TLA in 2013 to ensure an independent voice for the technology sector was heard, with a focus on the private sector. And since then, he's been championing London as a global tech hub and campaigning to address some of the biggest challenges facing tech companies in the UK: diversity, digital skills, immigration, infrastructure, and access to funding. Russ was previously the chairman of the marketing group of Great Britain, following senior positions at Skype, Telefónica, O2, and CEO of the later stage startup called Mobileway. In his role as marketing director for O2, Russ brokered the relationship with the O2, and that's since become the most successful indoor venue in the world. And I know it's one thing he's really proud of. In 2019, Russ was named London Evening Standard's Progress 1000 list of most influential people in our beautiful capital. Welcome, Russ.
Thank you, Prema. Nice to see you. Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
Okay. Shall we start with a kind of easing you in question? How has this London Tech Week been for you? Because it's been so different. Could you perhaps give us 3 highlights or takeaways?
Sure. Well, I think, as you've mentioned, it's been a different type of London Tech Week. This is the 7th year that we've done London Tech Week, and TLA, Tech London Advocates, has been a founding partner since we launched this back in 2014, when Mayor Boris Johnson and former Mayor Michael Bloomberg opened the event. And my, how we've grown. But this year has been different because the entire event is virtual. And I think, obviously, there are some drawbacks to that, because we all like to meet each other in person and build relationships that way. But I think this virtual style has worked really well. I think all of the events are free to attend. There is such a wealth of events happening. So for me, I've seen a lot, for example, today on diversity and inclusion, raising that as a key issue and theme and bringing people together to talk about that. There's a lot of connecting between London Tech and many other tech hubs around the world. For example, on Tuesday, I was with tech leaders from Nanjing in China, who are very interested in building a relationship with London. So there's been a lot going on, and the platform that we use still enables a good degree of networking. And I've certainly connected with people who have joined the platform who I haven't been able to speak to directly. So some real good things coming through London Tech Week. A lot of lessons learned that will carry into 2021, where I think and hope we'll have a physical event next year, subject to the health pandemic. But I think there will be a strong virtual aspect to it as well. Okay.
And could we, I think you touched on it just now by mentioning Nanjing and meeting a lot of people, so tech has a very global outlook. And I've also spoken a little about Tech London advocates and global tech advocates, which is one of your other hats in the introduction. And perhaps one could best sum up their ethos across all the advocates organizations across the world, which is, it's very much about connections and inclusivity. Yet we are at a time in, populist politics where the big players in tech in particular are being challenged by, for want of a better word, populist nationalist governments. So let me just rattle off Huawei, TikTok, Facebook, Google's facing investigations, difficult circumstances by everybody from Trump to the European Commission. Is tech, big tech in particular, never mind smaller tech, going to survive this onslaught of populism?
Well, I definitely think that big tech will survive. And in fact, during the pandemic, I think we've seen the role that big tech is playing getting even larger and stronger in terms of their dominance. I mean, there was a market correction this week, but the tech valuations, particularly of the US tech giants, is just off the scale. I think, the big tech players in China like Baidu and Alibaba and Tencent, their influence continues to build and grow as well. So they will be, I think, largely okay. There might be some restrictions put on them, potentially from the European Union as well. But I also think, the geopolitical environment is an opportunity for them to figure out how do they behave as better corporate citizens. I get frustrated with Facebook in terms of what's on the platform. How do we make sure that data is being used in a sensible way? That applies to Google and Facebook, as well as to some of the big Chinese players. So that is something that we'll have to navigate through. But that said, there's still a huge amount of innovation that's happening and will continue to happen. I'm probably even more excited whenever you have a major global event, whether it's a recession or in this instance, a pandemic. I think as we come out of it, we're going to see greater amounts of disruption, greater amounts of innovation, and that really excites me. So, the big tech companies will be around for a long time, but some of their businesses, might experience some degree of disruption from the innovation that's emerging.
Okay, but will perhaps any actions on the parts of governments perhaps hurt the smaller companies who are emerging? Is that a concern?
It is a concern. One of the things that I have campaigned for through Tech London Advocates is around how nations are implementing a digital tax. Don't get me wrong, I'm supportive of a digital tax. I think tech companies should be paying their fair share. But the way it's been implemented, particularly in France, and then until recently, discussions through the UK, each country has been going on it in their own specific way. And I think that's confusing. And I think for the tech businesses, the unicorns that are growing in the UK and France and in Germany would potentially be tripped up by a digital tax. So the message was, look, let's do it at an OECD level. Let's not do it country by country. And I think there are other examples like that. But there are also ways in which I think regulations can lead the way. GDPR, the global data protection regulations, I think by and large have been a good thing for Europe. I see adoption of that happening by big tech companies in America. Perhaps aspects of it will be adopted by companies in China and other parts of Asia. So there's give and take, but I do think the world will continue to evolve, but tech, in my opinion, is going to come out of this in a much stronger way.
That's good. It's always to have a good positive note, and it's very interesting. We hosted an event earlier today about tech for impact, so really tech for good. And in terms of the positive stories we were hearing coming out of, the 4 companies we had speaking, and some people have been through, perhaps about 3-4 months of a bit of a crunch, but are actually starting to emerge. And I hope we are going to remain on that path.
Yeah, well, I think just to maybe follow up on that, there's kind of 2 elements of this for me. There have been companies that have been struggling, particular early stage startups that we've been worried about. And we campaigned, and our Chancellor of the Exchequer launched the Future Fund, which has been very helpful. But at the same time, we're seeing health tech businesses, ed tech businesses, cyber businesses, fintech businesses, all growing In fact, Tech Nation in their report this week said there's been an 36% increase in tech vacancies since lockdown. So the growth in the sector continues. Our challenge is, how do we fill those jobs with really good talent and good diverse talent?
Okay, thank you. Now, I had actually got a question on talent, diversity, and pipeline, but I'm going to pick up on a question from Paul because he posted it very early, which indicates he's very passionate about it. And his question reads, has Russ had any success in getting Her Majesty's government to address the insanely daft obstacles for non-immigrant visa entry into the United Kingdom? There have been promises on immigration front to get skilled workers, but honestly, some of us like living in countries that are good at rugby and have awesome weather and are therefore more concerned with being able to expeditiously have employers visiting rather than immigrating to London as a hub.
Yeah. Yes, it's a great question, Paul. We have been campaigning on immigration policy since TLA started. In fact, the very first working group we set up was the TLA Immigration Working Group. Why did that happen? 1 in 3 London tech workers is from overseas. And up until the referendum, you know, freedom of movement was an integral part of the importance of our sector. You know, having people move across Europe and coming to London has been a very, very useful thing for the sector. Since the referendum and some of the subsequent changes on policy, we've been taking a number of steps. So there's kind of 3 types of visas that we have focused on. The first one is the Tier 1 visa, sometimes known as the Exceptional Talent Visa. And I think the government has moved constructively in a number of areas. They've allowed things like third-party endorsements. They've increased the number of exceptional talent visas. That's been really good. They did take away the entrepreneur visa. So actually somebody like me, I came here through marriage, but if I were to come here, that route has been closed. And that's something that we've said to the government is very unfortunate. The third-party endorsement route is very, very important. But when that was announced, many of the third-party endorsers were not properly prepared. So if you were somewhere in the world trying to get here on a Tier 1 visa, it was not a good process. And the people who I've spoken to who've come here on Tier 1 visas have said it can be a nightmare. We have fed that back to the government, and I've been very public with both government and media about that. The second category is the Tier 2 visa. This is the skilled migrant route to the UK. And we have been absolutely outspoken to the government to say, lift the cap on Tier 2 visas now. Don't wait till we come out of the European Union. So we got them to move on saying they plan to lift the cap. Theresa May, former Prime Minister, when she was head of the Home Office, put a cap on those visas of 20,000 per year. And we were having tech workers and healthcare workers competing with each other, and a lot of people were being turned away. So the solution was to lift the cap, which is good. We also worked with the Migration Advisory Committee. I took them on a tech tour a few years ago to get a number of jobs on the shortage occupation list. What that means is that if a job's on the shortage occupation list, you do not have to advertise for that position in the UK for 4 months before you can recruit externally. So we keep pushing to say, lift the cap, lift the cap. It will also send a good soft power message globally by people who are confused by Brexit. The last point, Tier 4 visas, student visas. We worked with a number of organizations like London First and Tech UK. It was a 2-year period where you were allowed to stay as a student. It went to 6 months and we all went crazy. And then we got it back to 2 years because we said to the government, students from China, India, the USA, let them stay here. Some of them will set up businesses and tech businesses. And you know what? They will connect and trade back to their home countries. We want that to happen. So the good news is they're listening and they've made some adjustments. I'm not quite convinced about the points-based system that's being implemented, but we will continue to give feedback on it. So a long answer to your question, but it's a complicated area. So I hope that was useful.
That was excellent. Thank you, Russ. I think that was very detailed and it is complicated. It deserves a good answer. So thank you. I think we've talked about the volume of talent, or rather the lack of it, and the need to let people in. Can we also go on to the diversity of the talent pipeline, and perhaps could we understand what your outlook is? What is TLA doing, and how far have we got down the path? My own instinct is not very far, but am I seeing the glass half full?
No, your instinct is a good one. I think the glass half full perspective on diversity and inclusion in tech is that more and more people, more and more companies, more and more organizations are mobilizing to address this, because everybody's looking at this and saying there's something fundamentally wrong if your sector is made up of 80% white men. And we need to change that, especially with such a diverse city like London. The incongruity of it all is shameful. So we have worked with a number of organizations to make sure that we raise the profile. I've hosted numerous events on the importance of diversity. What I'm particularly pleased about is we have a number of organizations in Tech London Advocates, a Women in Tech group, which has over 4,000. Last year, we launched a Black Women in Tech group. We support UK Black Tech. We have a TLA LGBTQ group. And on Monday of this week, we launched a Tech for Disability group. And so I feel like we have great people in these groups who are doing very good things at a grassroots level. They do practical workshops, good initiatives that we can share with each other about how you address diversity and inclusion in your organization. I always bring this back to the business case, which is, we know through many reports, whether it's McKinsey or KPMG or whomever, that those businesses that have diverse management teams and diverse boards are more successful, they're more profitable, and they build better products and services. So if your organization is not reflective of the diversity that's around you, you've got a problem, both from a societal point of view, but also from a business point of view. So we have done a lot of work in that space. We will steadily move the needle. I personally want to see targets and quotas put in place. I know that's very controversial. I say that because I think we have to move the needle more quickly than it's being moved, so that we're not looking at a glass half empty.
Okay, and what do you think accounts for the reluctance? I mean, why are we not having enough people? Because is it a case of, and the thing is, we talk about diversity, but let's be very clear, I'm Asian, there are lots of Asian people, particularly Indian people, now I'm half Indian, who work in tech. So when we talk about the lack of diversity in tech, which particular group, and you alluded to Black women in tech, and I suspect that's an element of it, is it a case of they're not encouraged to go in, or is it a case, they apply for jobs and you look at a name or you look at a face and you go, nah?
I think it's many reasons. There's not one specific reason or another. So when we talk about it with respect to gender. We talk about it with respect to BAME, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic. We talk about it with respect to sexual orientation. And increasingly, we're talking about it with respect to people with disability. So for me, that's what we're looking at. I think, why are there issues with this? I think one, if you look at the emergence of many tech startups, the founders tend to be white men. Or have tended to be white men. Their investors have tended to be white men, and the people that they continue to back are from the similar socioeconomic class. What I am seeing is an awakening, particularly on the investor side, in the investor community, saying we need to do much more to change these dynamics. I was really pleased, for example, I mentioned earlier about the Future Fund that the Chancellor of the Exchequer launched this year. That's being implemented by the British Business Bank. And they've started to report on the diversity of the companies that they're investing in. But myself and a few other advocates went to the British Business Bank and said, you're not being transparent enough. They were reporting on the diversity of the management team, but for example, they weren't reporting on the founders of those businesses. And we were saying, look, maybe the numbers are not great, but be transparent. We can all learn from this. And they've listened and they're working to fix that. So there's an educational piece to this. But the other thing is, I also challenge every startup out there, go out and try and find diverse recruitment pools. Don't go to the same recruitment pools over and over again. The talent is out there. You might have to work a little bit harder to find it, or at least engage with other organizations who can help you get to those diverse pools of talent.
Okay, thank you, Russ. Can we come on to Brexit, that ever cheerful subject, which disappeared only because of something more depressing than Brexit. Have you a sense of how prepared the industry is, the tech industry is for Brexit, both within the UK and counterparts and foreign tech companies? Are you concerned about the preparedness of the industry?
In part, yes. Although I would preface this and say, look, it's been 4 years since the referendum. We probably have some of the most resilient entrepreneurs who have been operating blindly about what they actually need to prepare for a number of years. We had an election in December. The picture became somewhat clearer in terms of knowing how we were going to move through Brexit. We're in this transition phase at the moment, which ends at the end of the year. And sadly, we've had a global pandemic hit us in that time. So I think that the London and the UK entrepreneurs are probably some of the most resilient people you can meet, who are flexible and adaptable and trying to do whatever they can. We just need clarity. My fear at the moment, given the noise that we're hearing day in and day out, is I do not want to see us crash out of the European Union or have a very hard Brexit. Now, some of this might be negotiating bluster, but there's a lot at stake here, especially for tech businesses, because trade deals usually cover trading in goods, not necessarily in services. We want to make sure that our fintech businesses can operate on the continent. We want to make sure that data flows, not just from the UK to the EU, but from the EU to the UK can happen seamlessly. And at the moment, unless there's some additional agreements, we could hit some very serious problems in terms of data and data flows if we don't get things sorted. So I'm putting some trust in our leaders that they know that they need to work this through. I have, especially during the pandemic, I've spoken to many government agencies that they are very good at calling on the sector to give them feedback. So I've spoken to DCMS, Digital Culture, Media and Sport. I've spoken to the Department for International Trade, with the Treasury Department, with BEIS, Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and with advisors at Number 10 over the past few months on the pandemic impact and also getting ready for Brexit. So they're listening. We just have to see this play out, and hopefully it will play out in a reasonably constructive way. Okay, and could we perhaps, I was going to ask the cheerful question, but I don't think we're quite at cheerful time yet. So there's something I'd like to pick on. One of the issues which you have been campaigning on is access to funding. Yes.
And I think I'd just like to, how well do you think funders have been supporting startups during the pandemic? And I know we've heard some questionable behavior, and perhaps you can touch on that, but also perhaps shine a light on the people who have taken a really good response to the startups they have invested in. Yes. By and large, net, everything I've picked up so far has demonstrated to me, there are some exceptions, but many funders and many investors have been working very closely with their startups and their scale-ups to ensure that they have the funding that they need. Now, the particular area of the ecosystem that we've worried about has been the early stage startups. In March, when the pandemic hit, a number of organizations came together and formed Save Our Startups. So TLA was one, Capital Enterprise was another, Kodak was another. And we certainly worked with the government, which ultimately led to the Future Fund, which was both the fund and the grant pool for Innovate UK. The fund has been oversubscribed, which is an interesting signal, and hopefully more funding will be made available. The Innovate UK fund is also being subscribed to very quickly. So that's been good. The venture firms that I've spoken to, I think many of them have really tried to step up and ease funding for their startups.
But that the startups also had to prove that their business models were robust. So if the startup was able to pivot their business model to deal with the current times, then I think their likelihood of getting funding was better. We were part of a campaign called Activate Our Angels, because we felt that angels were sitting on the sidelines, but rightfully so. They were very nervous about the economic condition. We continue to campaign for getting R&D tax credits paid more quickly. We have also campaigned to get the EIS, the Enterprise Investment Scheme, and VCT, Venture Capital Trust rules eased. That would make it easier for existing investors to put more into the startups and scale-ups that they're investing in. So I'd say by and large, a good story. It's not perfect. I give the Chancellor and the Treasury good marks for what they're trying to do to make sure funding is available. We have seen from the reports that I've seen, funding levels have certainly dipped this year, but they're still pretty healthy in London compared to many other European tech hubs. In fact, our tech sector has raised the same amount of money in the first 6 months of this year than they did in all of 2019. So the money is still flowing, which reinforces for me the strength of London's tech ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question from Andrew who's saying, I'm hearing that a number of independent co-working spaces are struggling. Tech Hub has already closed. These have been key for the startups in London. Does Russ agree this is an issue? Can anything be done to help them before it's too late?
This is a great question, Andrew. This is an issue. And sadly, I think we're going to see more of these co-working spaces struggle. Hopefully not all of them. Hopefully the more vibrant ones will continue to do well. I'm a big fan of Here East and Plexel in Olympic Park. I'm sure we'll come on and talk about Scale Space opening up, which I think is a real vote of confidence in what's happening here in London. The thing that we're going to have to watch, that I think we're going to, over time, be okay with, is the commercial property or commercial real estate market in London is going to go through a fundamental transformation. Why? We know that workers who are going in 5 days a week, many of them are only going to go in twice a week. I've been doing a separate project with Global Tech Advocates, talking to IT leaders around the world. And many companies, particularly larger companies, are making fundamental decisions right now that are basically saying, do I keep investing and expanding my commercial property, or do I invest more in technology for remote working? And they're kind of going on the technology for remote working, but they're saying we need to realign our space in our office for collaboration, for partnership. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of our bigger corporate entities suddenly transform and become co-working spaces. That's my prediction. That will take time to get to, but I see the seedlings of that getting ready to happen.
Interesting. Okay, thank you, Russ. Now, I think we're just about out of time, so I'm going to ask you one question, which some people go, what? Which is, you are a long-standing resident of Hammersmith and Fulham, of course, Upstream's patch. And so the question is, what do you think this part of London has got going for it?
Well, I'm clearly biased because I've lived in Hammersmith and Fulham for 30 years. I absolutely love it. The accent is not from here, but I married a Londoner and she brought me here 30 years ago. I think from a business perspective, I mean, you look at the location, we're close to Heathrow. That was actually part of the reason for being here. I do a lot of travel, so getting to and from Heathrow is key. Getting into central London and other parts of London was also key. So the location is really, really good. We have some good big corporates here. You have GE, you have the BBC, but you've seen other players like Blenheim Chalcott, like Dunhunby, come into the borough. So you've got a really good mix of startups, larger businesses. What I almost call it, this is a microcosm of Greater London happening in our borough. And that to me is really exciting. The next piece of this equation is White City. The Imperial College Innovation Lab, I just think has also been another game changer. That has been very, very powerful for the dynamics. We've got scale space about to open up. So what I've seen happen in Shoreditch and Hoxton, what I've seen happen out in Stratford, what I've seen around the King's Quarter, the Knowledge Quarter in King's Cross, is happening in Hammersmith and Fulham. And I'm just so excited when I'm talking to people to say, it's all over London. So if you go into City AM today, I've got an op-ed and I mention this. I think the other piece of this is a great borough to live in. You know, you've got great culture, great food. I'm a huge fan of the Bush Theatre. My wife and I are members. You've got the Lyric Theatre in Hammersmith. You've got the river. This is a great place. So the potential here is fantastic. And I'm just so excited that, you know, it's fintech, it's medtech, it's data tech, all starting to come together in Hammersmith and Fulham.
Thank you, Russ. Now, we're going to try and put everybody in the mood for the last bit. So it's a very quick question. So it's a cocktail making session we're coming up to next. Where is your favorite spot to eat and or drink in Hammersmith and Fulham?
My middle son is a chef in East London, so we do gravitate that way, but we love our local area. We live near a road called Askew Road. There's a great Tunisian restaurant called Adam's Cafe that we go to.
Yes.
There's Somtam, Thai food restaurant. I grew up in the Southwest of America. I'm so excited that a great Tex-Mex restaurant has opened up near us as well. So there's a lot of great places that you could go to for great food, great drinks. The cafes, the pubs along the river, you know, too many to mention. You've got the River Cafe at the very high end of things, which is, you know, if you want a really great splurge, what a wonderful place to go. We're not short on really good places to eat and drink here.
Okay, that wasn't pick one, but that was a very good advertising for the entire borough. So thank you very much, Russ, for a very insightful, and I think some of the questions you've answered. You know,
can I make just one other quick point for anybody who's interested in joining Tech London Advocates? The group is open, inclusive. You're very welcome. You can follow up with Prima. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn and just say you were part of this upstream session, and then you'll get a welcome email from me. We'll bring you into the community. And if there's a particular working group you'd like to get involved with, just let me know.
Thank you, Russ. We'll include the link to TLA in our thank you email to everybody, but thank you for an insightful and hopeful session.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Right.